Thank you. And well, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm in Brisbane, Australia right now, and it's 6 p.m. in the evening. So wonderful to connect with so many people around the world. My topic looks at a new idea, a concept we've developed called Presilience. And I'd like to take you on a small journey at looking at why Presilience, why we need to think differently, and how we can leverage human capability together with technology, innovation, and adaptation to thrive, not just in the world that we're in today, but in the world that we're moving towards. More and more people are feeling disrupted and frustrated and are struggling to figure out what the skill sets they need to develop are to be able to thrive today. So if we look at this, I'd like us to start looking at a few ideas. The first idea I'd like us to think about is, let's take the view of opportunity. And I'd like all of you today just to imagine for a minute an opportunity that you've missed during your career, during your personal life, or at any other stage. And think about how frustrating it is to miss an opportunity because they often don't come twice. And equally, some opportunities are significantly better than others. When we think of the idea in the world of risk management, we often think about stopping bad things happening. But equally, we want to be in the position to capitalize on and grab upside opportunity. Often we talk about this idea of opportunities being when preparation and position align. But it's so much more than that. It needs a different way of thinking to tackle some of the challenges we have to deal with today. So I'd like you to think about the world we're in today. What's changed? What is changing? And to do that, I'd like us to share this idea of something we refer to as VUCAD, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and digitized. This is enhancement of the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that was used originally in the late 1980s, actually in the United States by the US Army War College, to describe how the world was post the end of the Cold War. Fast forward to where we are today. VUCA still happens. Things are still volatile. In other words, things happen very quickly and change happens very fast. Things are uncertain. And for humans, uncertainty is not a new thing, but the ability to forecast the future has become so much more complex and so much more difficult because of the following variables: complexity, ambiguity, and digitization. So while uncertainty has been something that humans have had to deal with for a long time, we have so much more to be uncertain about. Equally, the impact of digitization across volatility, and we only have to look, for example, at last year when CrowdStrike had an issue with updating their software, and we landed up with air travel, sea travel, and a lot of government services in many countries being disrupted. So part of the challenge now is that we are hyper-connected. We have access to the world's information in our pockets, on our phones, and things have changed because of that. And it's unlikely that we're going to slow down. In fact, with the advent of generative AI and agentic AI, with the soon to be rollout of quantum computing, the world's going to continue to change. So uncertainty is something we've got to get comfortable with. For those of you who are new to the world of complexity, we need to look at what makes the world complex. And there's two academic theories that are useful to look at. One is referred to as complex adaptive systems theory. The other is chaos theory. And if we look at both of those, we can look at 4 states or systems of operation. So I'd urge you to look at your business, or if you're a consultant, the businesses you consult for. If you work in government, think of the systems you interact with. So the first challenge we've got is that a lot of the tools we use today to run organizations, lead teams, are based on outdated methodology. They're based on the idea that we have a high degree of control and a high degree of certainty. So the first system we tend to look at is a simple system that has a start point, has an end point, and we have a very high degree of control and certainty of all the variables in between the start and end points. So much so that even non-experts can control a system like that. For simple systems, the primary tools used are audit, assurance, management, and control and quality assurance. We are pretty good and we're pretty au fait with how those systems work. We then got better. And as the second and third industrial revolution started to kick in, we found that we could actually build complicated systems. And a complicated system has a start point, has an end point, but equally is complicated. That means that in between our start point and end point, we have lots and lots and lots of simple systems. So many systems that we need experts to help us navigate that and control and manage our system. So if you look at any specific vocation, but let's just take, for example, medicine. We have so many medical specialities that a specialist doctor is required sometimes when you have something wrong with your body. We could take another one, the field of law. There are so many different specialities in the field of law. So we got better in terms of how we manage complicated systems by creating specialists. An organization can still have a high degree of control and certainty in the world of complicated, provided it has access to these specialists. So if we draw a line there and we go simple and complicated systems sit here, we tend to look at how do we thrive and perform well in those systems. And generally it's the skills of management that enable us to do well in those two systems. But as per the VUCAD acronym, and if we look at the default today, it's complexity. So complexity is generally defined as we have a start point, we have an end point, but in between that, we have many, many, many complicated and simple systems. So many complicated and simple systems that not even experts can predict the intersection and the outcomes of a failure or a change to some of those systems. And we see this happening in the world today more and more. So part of the challenge for us there is the skills that require us to thrive through complexity are quite different to the skills we need to manage simple and complicated. They're the skills of situational awareness, critical thinking, effective decision-making, highly adaptive communication skills, the ability to act in relaxed states, which most of us should be able to do, but also to react and act under pressure. Equally, we need to have the skill of learning and a growth mindset. Otherwise, it's impossible to adapt quickly enough to what's going on around us. So if we want to thrive in complexity, it's not quite the knowledge skills and the control skills we need for simple and complicated. It's a bit different. Equally, if we look at the world of chaos, and I'm sure every single one of you listening to this has at some stage in your career worked in chaos. Chaos is often defined as we have no start point, we have no end point, but we know we don't want to be there. Those of you who are experts at wrangling chaos usually have highly evolved skills like situational awareness, critical thinking, decision-making, communications, and leadership, where you step into a chaotic situation, you gather information very quickly, you decide to do something, and even if that thing you decide doesn't work, you then try the next thing, and that creates a start point. And once you have a start point, we can work to an end point, which means we can bring chaos back to complexity. So in order for us to thrive in a VUCAD world, we need to look at the skills that enable us to thrive in complexity and chaos, not just the knowledge base and skills we have to manage simple and complicated. So complexity is a critical input to the world we're in today. Let's talk about ambiguity for a moment. One of the biggest challenges we have in the world today is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. More and more, research is showing us that people have a higher level of confidence in what we see on social media than what we actually see in the news, what we read in the news, or what our leaders are telling us. That's incredibly flawed, bearing in mind there's no quality checks or assurance behind what we're seeing on social media. But realistically, it creates the challenge for us that if we want to make a good decision so that we can proactively grab an opportunity, we need to make sure the facts are there and that we're making the decision based on what's real, not what's based on perceived. That's incredibly difficult in a world where we're overwhelmed by information and much of that information might not be accurate. So part of the challenge for us is thriving is not as simple as just gathering the information. We have to make sure that the information is actually intelligence, which is fit for purpose, vetted information. Otherwise, dealing with ambiguity can be overwhelming. And then the last component of VUCAD, being digitization, is affecting everything we do. And it will continue to affect everything we do. If we look at just where the field of generative artificial intelligence has gone in the last few months, to the point that agentic AI systems are so sophisticated, they can do things at a pace and a speed that humans can't, we see the world changing around us live time. And that requires a different way of thinking. So if you ask, why do we need to look at the world differently and why do we need a different set of skills? It's because by default, the world is now VUCA'd. And some of the people who work with me have actually started using VUCA'd as a verb to actually go, hey, I've been disrupted from what I was doing today. I've been VUCA'd pretty hard. How do I turn that to opportunity? So now that we've established a baseline of why we have to think and act differently, let's explore that a little bit further. And let's have a look at what we can do about that. So the first thing I'd like you to think of doing, and there is a QR code on the screen, feel free to take a shot of that. That will direct you to a risk intelligence self-assessment tool, which you can use for free and will measure your risk intelligence. So when we talk about this idea of risk intelligence, we have a definition for it. It is an applied attribute. That means it's something we have to actually do. It's a living skill, which means it changes all the time, that enables us to embrace upside opportunity while we manage potential negative outcomes. So we all want to hire people that are incredibly smart, so they have a great IQ and skill set. We also want to hire people that have great EQ. They are very good at collaborating and working with others. Occasionally, and I'm sure if you're somebody who's tuned in and listening to sessions like this, you are somebody who has a good EQ and good IQ, or at the very least, you're working on yourself continuously. The challenge we've got is we can find people who are smart, get along with others really well, but they might make terrible decisions. So risk intelligence is all about how do we create great decision-making and decisioning as part of our skill set to thrive in a VUCA'd world. We need to be able to develop this idea of risk intelligence before we can shift into this idea of opportunity centrism. And when we get to the world of opportunity centrism, it's a wonderful shift because things start happening for you, not just to you. And even when you have a negative outcome, that negative outcome is something you can convert to opportunity and learn from. So simplistically put, we become learning and adaptive creatures that can thrive in any environment with any challenge thrown in front of us, as opposed to reactive, hyper-stressed people who are struggling to keep up and just keep their head above water during this robust period of change. In fact, it's interesting. For those of you who work in IT and tech, I want you to think back maybe 20, 25 years ago, when we all started switching to using different operating systems. And I don't care which software system you pick, but for ease of use, let's pick Microsoft Office. I guarantee you, even 20 or 25 years ago, Microsoft Office had capabilities that you didn't use, had functions you didn't even know about. Fast forward to where we are now, almost every software tool we use has more capability than humans can manage. And what do? We keep overcomplicating this. So in the world we're in now, generative AI is going to create huge opportunities for those who are able to be adaptive and are able to grow your human skill sets. For people who are stuck in knowledge work, who are really focusing on the memorization and then the regurgitation of knowledge, things are going to get disrupted quite quickly, and it's going to be a challenge for you to find the next phase where you can add value. So as we move forward, let's talk about what we need to be thinking about to be able to thrive in the world that we're in and the world we're moving to. So I did write a book on the topic of Presilience, and initially when we started looking at Presilience, the idea was more around proactive resilience and how do we build the ability to get through hardship and keep going and thrive incredibly well. As we started applying the knowledge, we found a few big problems, and some of them were just phonetic. When we hear the word resilience, we think respond, react, recover. We don't think of the preparation we need to do ahead of time. We also don't think of the opportunities that will present as a result of going through something tough, which requires resilience. So I'd urge you to think about a few things. The first piece is let's think on what we refer to as level 1, and there's 4 levels I'd like you to think at. Level 1 is me, level 2 is you, level 3 is us, and level 4 is society. Ideally, we'd like to come up with solutions and approaches that work on all 4 levels simultaneously. And I'd like to be thinking of what's good for me. Is it good for you? Is it good for us? And is it good for the greater good? If we can tick those boxes, we generally should just do what we have to do and move on. But very few decisions in life will enable you to tick all of those boxes. This is where dividing your mindset into 3 different boxes can be quite useful. I like to think of them as a 3-legged stool, and you require all 3 legs for the stool to stand upright and not collapse. The first is compliance. So anybody who's worked in any first world country in a regulated environment will be very au fait with the compliance mindset. This is where I have a set of rules, standards, or guidelines that I must apply. I don't have a choice. To be legally compliant or to meet the requirements of my employer, I have to do these things. The challenge with compliance mindset alone is it's always backwards looking, it's slow to change, and generally speaking, high performers perform incredibly well because of engagement, alignment, and motivation. Compliance makes it kind of hard for the majority of people to be able to achieve high performance because it's a set of rules that are comparatively constrictive and don't create opportunities really for growth and adaptation. But what is the point, for example, of starting a brand new, highly successful business, but not being compliant and going to jail? Okay, what is the point, for example, of being a highly successful athlete, but not looking after your health post your athletic career and getting sick and not being able to enjoy your success? So we can divide compliance into a few boxes, but realistically, if you're thinking of it for the self, it's the things you have to do that are non-negotiable. We should put things like health and proactive health maintenance, including physical and mental health, in the compliance box, stuff we have to do. If we get that right, it's not hard for most corporate executives or even middle managers to get their heads around compliance because that's how we operate simple and complicated systems. But we need to move past compliance and look at the world of resilience too. We can never comply our way to adaptation and innovation. We can never comply our way to highly motivated workforces that adapt to stimulus straight away and perform really well. So more and more, we're seeing that high performance is a shift past compliance. This is where resilience comes in. The idea of being able to weather disruption and keep going is really important. The challenge in the world of resilience is it often works like this. If you look at my hand and you imagine my hand is a line of disruption, strategy, whether it's a personal or a business strategy, is setting you on a course and you're carrying on that course. You then hit this disruption. If we're good at resilience, and if this is corporate, then we might be good at business continuity, business interruption assessments, etc., which enable us to hit this barrier, go through, over and around, and then continue where we were going as quickly as possible. The problem with that is twofold. In a fast-paced, highly adaptive world, who says you were going the right way in the beginning? Okay, so we might have been traveling the wrong direction anyway, but all of our systems are trying to pull us back to traveling the direction we were traveling before disruption. The next thing is we learn so much through disruption that we might have actually learned that even though I wanted to get through disruption and keep going, it's a better strategy for me to go up, down, around, or even change direction. So often people feel this is hypocritical, particularly of leaders. We hate it when leaders change their minds. But to be successful in a VUCAD world, we actually need to embrace the reality of being able to change our mindset, change our directions as more information, better information, and more alternatives become available. This is the shift from a resilience mindset to a presilience mindset. And it's marked by 2 key things. It's marked by proactivity. So I focus on preventing the things that will absolutely destroy the likelihood of my success ahead of time. And it focuses on opportunity centrism. It focuses on making sure we're not just managing downside risk, but we're grabbing upside risk too. So if you look at how you make this work, this is a very individual thing, and it differs from corporation to corporation, team to team, and society to society. But in the modern world we're in, most first world environments have become so over-reliant on looking at compliance as the way we manage any sort of challenge, and regulation as the way we enforce our compliance. But unfortunately, because things are changing too quickly, regulations and changes tend to not keep up. So we need to be a lot more adaptive. We need to learn to change and innovate as part of the way we operate. Sometimes compliance regimes don't allow us to do this. That's why you have to have this three-pillared approach to high performance. So for those of you interested, I strongly encourage you to pick up the book on Presilience, which is aligned more to the first two domains, that's self and others, but equally to start a journey for yourself that looks at how do you build the capabilities to thrive in the world we're in and the world we're going to. So that means not just growing risk intelligence, it means knowing how do we balance what we refer to as dynamic risk equilibrium. That's how much risk do I want to take versus how much risk do I want to avoid. That's a moving target because any high-performing organization will achieve great things by making the right risk-based decisions. You don't achieve high performance by not taking risk, but you also create significant loss and harm by taking too much risk. So really, our idea is to create what we refer to as the dream. That's dynamic risk equilibrium, assessment and management in one piece, so that we are continually absorbing information, analyzing how much risk we want to take, looking at opportunities and making the right call. Our idea is to move away from just surviving everyday life and surviving disruption and going, how do we thrive? How does high performance become the default for me, my team, my organization, and hopefully for our society? And there's a bigger piece there. It's not just high performance as a once-off, it's sustainable high performance. We often talk about sustainability from the mindset or the view of the environment and climate change. But realistically, sustainability comes back to your performance, your team's performance, and your organization's outputs. A sustainable individual performance, which is part of a sustainable team performance, creates sustainable outcomes for an organization. It means we can keep running hard and winning for longer. It also means we can weather these disruptions when they hit us. So we need to start thinking in what we like to refer to as ambidextrous terms. No longer can you only be good at management or only be good at leadership. You need to be good at both, because management is really good for simple and complicated, not great for complexity and chaos. Leadership is critically important in both, but essentially, if I don't know how to lead myself, at least through disruption, it's going to be incredibly difficult to turn it to opportunity. So we want to grow both skill sets. You want to be really good at finding the balance between risk seeking and risk aversion. And equally, you want to move away from binary thinking where we're going, it's always a yes or a no. It's always black or white. It's always a 1 or a 0. And start looking at how do we live in the gray? How do we look at these decisions, these change points, which are not easy to articulate and don't fit into a comfortable, simple, or complicated box, so that we can start to turn those into opportunity? And the way we do that is by building the skill sets that I've just put up on the screen in front of you. We want to really grow these core skills and core capabilities. And these are dynamic and continuous. Even though they're listed there, they are not a list, they're a continuing circle. So it starts with this situational awareness piece. If I don't know what's happening around me, how do I get the right information to make a good decision? The next challenge comes with the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation piece. If I can't determine what is real and what's not, if I can't manage this information I've collected through my situational awareness phase, I still may land up making terrible decisions, ill-informed decisions, and decisions that in the long term may actually hurt me, even if I think it's the right decision at the time. We then get into the world of decision making, which in its own right is an entire discipline. But by harnessing the situational awareness and critical thinking before, we learn to make good decisions. We then need to be able to effectively guide ourselves through our decision or guide others and implement that decision. So it doesn't help if we can't communicate in the right way that decision. And you note under decision making, we have 2 points there, effective and directive. For business as usual, when we have time, collaborative-based leadership and communication can be wonderful. In crisis, you don't have time. Therefore, we have to be very quick and efficient in the way we make communication calls and communicate information. Both of those require a lot of practice to develop those skill sets. The ability to act or enact sounds so simple, but we need to think of 2 types of action and inaction. How do we sustainably perform at a high level during our business as usual or high control states? But equally, how do we perform incredibly well when we get disrupted and we're looking at adrenalized and pressured states? To thrive in a VUCAD world, we need to be able to do both. Now, some of us are better at one or better at the other, but the skill set we like to develop is something we call stactical, where I can be strategic and tactical or tactical and strategic simultaneously. That's when we get real high performance at a sustainable level. And the last core skill set is the ability to review, adjust, and learn. A growth and learning mindset are absolutely critical for the world we're in and the world we're going to. Things will continue to change at fast pace. And for those of you playing in the world of generative AI, you'll note that every day there's a new change, a new occurrence, a new evolution, a new adaptation. So this idea of constant learning has to become part of who we are. It wasn't so long ago, I'm nearly 50 years old. When I went to university and got my first degree, we were taught that the perfect system is a system where you can pull people in and out of it, and the system is so robust that regardless of the humans, it keeps going. We're almost there as a reality now with generative AI. But more and more, we found high performance in this world is not going to be binary. It's not going to be, I make it all tech and AI, or I make it all about humans. It's going to be about both. So for those of you who want to bulletproof your career moving forward and make sure you are valuable to yourself, your family, your team, and your employer, I would suggest you strongly start developing capability in these skills, and you put a lot of effort into enhancing your capability in these skill sets. So the question I'd like to ask you at this point is, so what now? If we know the world is VUCAD, we know we need to develop risk intelligence, we know we want to be more proactive, we need to change some of our habits. Changing habits can be quite tough. I also am the ASEAN and APAC head for the Institute of Strategic Risk Management. And when we look at strategy and risk management, we often like to think of these big societal moves and big shifts at large scale. But practically, we're not just thinking about society, because most of us, and even those of you who may be working for governments and are involved in high-level societal policy setting, will find that if the individuals don't buy into the policies, they don't work. So I would urge you right now to start with you. Start with the voice in your own head. Start analyzing your own thoughts. Start seeing which of your behaviors and actions you can enhance to get a better situational awareness, critical thinking, decisioning, communication, action, and learning flow. Okay. Obviously, you can buy my book, listen to the audio book, but equally, we've got on YouTube, on the Risk to Solution channel, there's about nearly 80 short videos of 1 to 5 minutes that cover all the concepts you need to be able to transition you and your team from static reactive compliance to high-performing resilience and presilience mindsets. If we get this right, we can actually start turning risks into opportunities more often and not feel like we're constantly responding to the next disruption or next threat. We can actually get in front of the curve. Again, I would urge you to focus on yourself first, because if you want to be a good team player, we either need to be a leader or a follower. To be either of those things requires a lot of self-efficacy and self-motivation, but it also then requires emotional intelligence, rapport building, and communication skills, all of which require a lot of work. From an organizational perspective, once we start looking at scale, one of the things we're going to have to start thinking about is not just how do we follow processes, set up processes, and enforce processes, but how do we adapt processes based on changing technology and changing human capabilities at the same time. If we can get alignment between what's good for me, what's good for your team, what's good for your organization, and what's good for society, we can get sustainable high performance, both in business as usual and disruption. Again, something incredibly hard to achieve. That's why we need to grow our knowledge base and our skill sets and capabilities to be adaptive. Equally, we need an incredibly evolved system of cognitive bias management. We are all highly biased as humans. That's how we navigate the world we're in. The late Dr. Daniel Kahneman spoke of two systems that we use in our mind. System one, which is our intuitive, reflexive, quick thinking mind, and system two, which is our analytical, slow, and deep thinking, or I like to call it the risk manager of the mind. Most corporate processes have been built only for system two, where research has shown us that roughly 95% of decisions are made with system one. So we need to be thinking about not just how we build the right processes and compliance systems, but how do we create the right intuitive human decision-making pieces that are also going to leverage AI and agentic AI as part of the way we make great decisions to thrive under stress and perform continuously well during business as usual. So again, the question I would ask you is, what are you going to do differently now? What's past is past, and every second, the only thing we can control is what is happening right now. We actually can only forecast the future, not live in the future. So the only moment you have is now. The ability to plan for the future creates opportunities for yourself. I would put to you that if you start putting a little bit more effort into building those capabilities and skill sets, to preparing yourself for the opportunities that inevitably will cross your path, if you put yourself out there, you will miss less opportunities, which means you can grow quicker, make more money, and be happier. You will manage more threats, which means you stop bad stuff happening. And for the opportunities and threats we can't manage, we then have the ability to adapt over time and learn so that we can do better next time. If you don't build these skill sets, we are constantly reactive, constantly getting disruptive, which leads to burnout, mental health challenges, and really poor life efficacy. So for those of you who are interested, it's not just about reading the book. We also run postgraduate education in this space. So feel free to visit the Institute of Presilience at presilience.edu.au. Feel free to Google with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and join me in this journey of trying to create a world that is far more sustainable with humans that are far more productive and less burnt out and are thriving through disruption, not just surviving. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this session, and I hope to be connected with you in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so